Hi, my name is Kim. I'm a grateful, recovering, compulsive overeater. Hi, I weigh and measure off the Gray Sheet food plan. I turn it into my sponsor every day. I love my food. I eat exactly what I commit. I don't eat between meals. I eat my meals, which was important to me to hear when I first came in the rooms. And abstinence is by far the most important thing in my life today, and the reason I am alive, and I'll explain why that's so. And my abstinent date is September 22nd, 2014. And hi, everybody. Yeah, it was interesting because when Risa said, somebody with over 90 days back to back, I was like, who's that? Like there's still a part of me that just doesn't like the outsides and the insides, like no relationship. Like, who is somebody that's qualified to do this thing? And I'm the kind of person that, like, every time I think I'm about to be fired, I get called into the boss's office because I'm getting promoted or something. Like, that is my mentality. My best friend and I kind of have a name for it. For years, we moved into this very, 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 what became a very fancy neighborhood in Brooklyn. But when we moved in, it was kind of, I wouldn't say run down. It was very led by these certain kinds of ethnic gangs. I don't know. I don't even know the politically correct way to say it. Anyway, but always limousines and everything. But it was like definitely this like very expansive, like big family, very, very safe feeling. But it was really like there was nothing around except laundromats and like very fancy, like stores that had nothing in them. Like you knew stuff was going on in the back, but there'd be like one flower in the front and it would say flower shop. Like it was that kind of place. And then it became very fancy. And when we moved in, it was like a huge 2-bedroom. And this was in the 90s. I don't even know why I'm telling this long story. I never have told this before in a meeting, but just to show you my mentality. And so the rent wasn't that much. And we probably lived there for 15 years and could have been charged like thousands more. Like, I'm sure it was not rent control. The landlords lived in the building. We were like, it was the landlords, had the bottom 2 floors. We had 1 floor. It was very typical Brooklyn thing. But for a good 10 years, every time we made a noise, they're going to evict us. They're going to evict us. And their last name was Lambert. So now when I say to him, I'm just Lamberting, he's just like, you're probably going to get a raise. Like, that is just my mentality. And I don't know why that's coming up, but it is. And I think I've had a really rough day, and I'm not sure why, just like feeling down and depressed and mostly in bed. And I had an important meeting today, and a really important meeting that I actually like scheduled, a work meeting. And I just said, I'm too sick, you guys take over. And I think it's just a combination of things that are just, I have this theory that stuff happens and gets processed in a way that I'm not necessarily conscious of. Like I'm one of the people that just really never cries. I can cry easily from joy, but I always say I only cry when I'm in labor, which was once. Like, I just don't have that faucet, but I can get very teary-eyed if my daughter says something or sunset. It's weird. But, so I think I just so there's so much going on, and I'm watching way too much CNN and just life. And my 13-year-old is living on a different coast and has been since kind of June because of gymnastics or whatever. And in a way, it's a dream come true. But then I'm like, well, I'm a mom, like just weird stuff. And I just think sometimes it hits me. And what abstinence gives me is the 3 meals a day so that I know I'm going to have, and so I can have a day like that. Like, today is just going to be one of those days. And even though I feel like I should have graduated from that, today's going to be one of those days where, I just weigh and measure, and that's it. And, so a lot's going on in the world. And even if I'm not like, on the front lines of any of it, in some ways, I work for a very political organization. So I'm having to hear about it all the time and think about it all the time. And like, we're a global organization, so hearing all kinds of points of view. Anyway, that has nothing to do with anything. But I just wanted to explain where I'm at. And it's good to be able to talk about, I suppose. So so I came in, so a lot of you have heard my story. I came in, I didn't think that I had an eating disorder, really, until I was maybe 16. But if I really think about it, I think at 14, maybe I started to feel a little chubby, but it didn't translate into eating less, I don't think, or like anything, just like, this is my body. And it was kind of nice because I was so used to being so skinny and being made fun of for being skinny, like not horribly made fun of, but I've been sharing about this lately because one thing that, the pandemic brings is, the ability to attend so many meetings and hear so many stories. Then what I've been paying attention to lately is a lot of people talking about being young and very uncomfortable in their bodies and like how sports plays into it, or like feeling awkward in social things, like people that are coming from bigger numbers when they're younger. And I was like, that sounds exactly like me and my, and I was skinny, but just still like just not comfortable in my body. And so it took me a while in just regular OA to identify that it was just, I was born with an ism, and the ism was really self-hatred. By 7 years old, I was just like having fantasies of just like having people in my room to protect me, and fantasies that like, or like killing myself, or wanting to watch like, you know, afternoon, like after school specials of just like suicidal teens, like that excited me. And so did Brady Bunch, but like that's what I was drawn to. And so I was gonna always have something. And so basically I was anorexic at 16, got the attention, the good attention, the bad attention, lost my period, blah, blah. And then just started binging. And that kind of was my life, like starving and binging. I never got big, but that's also because I was young, and I would also, if the binge was significant enough, I would run. But I just I couldn't have relationships, I couldn't have friendships. Like I know there are these three people, and say we were four, they were, there was a pack of four of us. I went to the Fame School, like the real Fame School. They made a movie of. And like and there was four of us, and we were all in the acting department and best friends. But like I'm sure they're all in touch. Like I know I slept at their houses all the time. They slept at my houses, but like I don't know where I was, like I just wasn't present. And then in college had a bunch of boyfriends. Like that was the thing too, just like, and this is what I'm kind of dealing with in my step work. I'm 55, I just turned 55. And even though I've always talked about it in therapy and all the 12-step programs and all my step work about like my vanity, but really somehow maybe the good sign is that a lot of the other defects have kind of gone into retreat for a while, one day at a time. And so how much, and also being just stuck inside all the time and not having my daughter. So it's basically me, the kitchen, CNN, a mirror, and my job. And occasionally, and I don't even go shopping now because I'm too afraid to go into the supermarket. So I have stuff delivered. So, it's just like a lot of me time. So, and then also, staring at myself all the time in this thing. And I'm definitely not cured enough to ever block the image. I'd much rather look at the image and hate it than block it. So that's just me, like me plus the Lambert thing. It's like me. And then outward, I will go to these like global forums and having people come up to me like, wow, you really changed that regional office. Oh my God. Like my second year, I brought in, like I'm a fundraiser, I brought in like 56% more than had been in the year before, like unheard of. And it's like, I don't know how who did that? Like that same thing, like from like when you said that somebody with like back-to-back accidents, 90 days, like, is that me? And I think, for the most part, I feel like I've grown into my shoes. I like that expression somebody said to me. And I've been through, and I'm not telling a lot of my story for some reason, but I've been through freaking shit. Like I've been through hell, and I don't even identify with it, which is, I guess, the good news. Like I had 10 years living in Israel, misery, like basically lived in a dungeon. Like I'm talking like mice, like I can't believe but in the fanciest town, of course, God forbid, and a lawsuit to get me and my kid out of the country that went on forever, that I won only because the father was so spastic he couldn't, sorry, rest in peace now, but like couldn't answer the mail. Like that was nobody wins those kind of cases. And just, and I just remember being in that situation, and I got into How around then, and I had already been in OA for many years. So go back to my story, which is, binge, starve, blah, blah, blah. Somebody got me to an OA meeting. It was great. Was in, life got perfect. Then I started drinking wine at lunch, sleeping with married bosses. I'm sure everybody's got the same story, something similar, just always stuff. And really, the more that I am, a few masters under my belt and a student loan under my belt, and just, I feel like vanity really kind of led just, even if it was just like, I'm going to get a PhD and I'm going to be, smarter than my older brother, like the kind of work, the kind of Al-Anon work that I had to do to realize that had, and the whole reason I went to Israel was to get my PhD, which I wound up not getting, but like, I was in Israel. I'm sorry, I'm jumping all over the place. I was in Israel and I would just sometimes sit there in the morning, baby in hand in this place and just be like, how the hell did I wind up here? And it was like, I knew I couldn't blame anybody else. And it was like this epiphany, like I can't blame anyone else. And I would really like sit there sometimes and just like try to retrace my steps. And to retrace my steps really was looking at all my character defects. I am not a victim. And that's why I have no regrets. Like I'm one of those people, I feel blessed that I don't have regrets of my past. One regret, maybe, that I quit like piano and dance. Okay, two. But like I had to, for whatever reason I had to, but like no regret. And I was in a shitty situation. It's like, how did I wind up with this guy? How did I wind up with this situation? How am I freaking in Israel? It wasn't even on the map for me. I mean, I'm Jewish and all, but like I always thought I'd live in France, drink wine, like stuff, like, and be an academic there. Like, and here I am, I'm 40 with a baby, this monster in the other room. And like, how? And that was just the turning point. Somebody said, you're going to come out of this smelling like a rose. And I didn't even know what they were talking about. I didn't know what they were talking about. Like I had gone so far down the scale. Really, I feel like I'm talking, and oh my God, I would go from building to building like every year because they were renovating. So I'd get they would abandon these buildings to make them safe for earthquakes. So like we would live in these like huge apartments, just me and my daughter, because the rent would be almost nothing because the landlords had to move out because they're renovating for an earthquake that might happen in 1,000 years. And like, so it would just be like me and my daughter and my 5-year-old and like just all the Arab workers, like rebuilding the building. I mean, it was incredible. And it was really like, I had to grow up in this like other country in a language I barely spoke as a single mom, basically an only parent. And how really got me through. Like when I first got to Israel, I started a bunch of just regular OA meetings in English. And like, I just knew I had to get back into OA. Like I just knew, like, even though I had stayed abstinent for many, many years outside of OA, I just managed to stay abstinent in my own way, not even in my own way. Like when I first got into OA in the early 90s, I just turned over what my food plan was. It was never a discussion then that you call it into your sponsor every day. I thought they'd get bored. Like it wasn't even like I had the red light list, the yellow light list, and the green light list of the foods. And after OA, I was able to do that for years. But I also had very good early recovery, like really jumped into the steps and really like meeting to meeting. And it was New York and there were meetings all the time. And I would do my homework in meetings and, just like jumping from meeting to meeting. Anyway, so 2 masters, bunch of jobs later, wound up in Israel, started some OA meetings in English. And that was really, really helpful for me. And then I relapsed. I mean, I suppose I did the abstinence got really redefined when I was pregnant. That was like, oh, this will be abstinent OA pregnant as much as I want, as long as I don't eat between meals, but the meals can be like 5 pies of blah. And crazy. And so then after enough relapse, I got into how, and that was great, of course, for the first month, amazing, maybe the second, third month. And then eventually those things that we don't have in Grey Sheet, we went back on. I still am not convinced that that's what did it, but I hear enough of that, and I'm not going to argue with all you people because you all know better, and this is the longest abstinence I've had, and the cleanest, and the best, and the most recovery. So, everybody says that it's probably the things that we were allowed to go back in, people that have had similar things, or, I was never a sugar addict as far as I knew. Like I was one of the people I could put a teaspoon in a cup of coffee. And when my how sponsor said, you can't do that anymore, I was like, why? And it was like years later, and in Grey Sheet, but I was like, oh, wow, all the health food stuff that I binged on, the dried versions of the things that we're allowed to have one of every day, that's a lot of sugar, so I probably was. And then eventually when I moved back here after Israel, I just went freaking haywire on the substitute sugars, you know, and even when I was anorexic, I wouldn't have substitute sugars because I was so all natural. They didn't have stevia then. Came back here, buckets of stevia, couldn't get enough, just couldn't get enough. That was my binge. That was my binge food. My binge food, as I said, you know, my binge food was really a lot of gray sheet foods, you know, like I never had to adapt, thank God, to gray sheet food or anything because like my binge foods were really like vegetables a lot until like they ran out and then I would have whatever was, you know, not glued to the floor. Thank you, Stacey, I saw that. So yeah, so I was going to gray sheet meetings because they were the only meetings I could really attend. They were on Saturday. I had the kid, blah, blah, blah. And I'm in the Bay Area. And yeah, and then one time I heard somebody qualify and she qualified on bottoming out on the substitute sugar. And I said, please be my sponsor. I'll do your food plan. I'll do anything. I don't think she's in the rooms anymore, but we made it so that day one, like, and it's been true to this day, 6.5 years later, you know, any substitute sugar of any kind, no, then I go back to day one. And if that changed for 1 second, all bets are off. Like for me, if I had one packet today, I'd have like a few buckets, maybe in 3 days from now. It might not even take that long. And I just can't even imagine how I was to my daughter. I'm sure she doesn't remember any of my food stuff since I've been abstinent since she's, you know, 6 basically. So it doesn't, you know, she'll just go into a house and if anybody offers anything, she just gives them the whole list of the things that I can't have. And so I never have to worry about it. And that's not a thing. Like, yeah. So she's never known me, but definitely, and there's a part of me that's still like I have my naturally sweet teas at nighttime. And it's just like, you know, when I'm done with dinner, it's like, daughter, don't talk to me. You can, you know, be on your device until 4 a.m. I need my me time. So I can still be like selfish in that way, but it's like, I don't know. Well, now she's on the East Coast, doesn't count. But you know, so that's something I've always had to deal with. But that's also like, you know, bedroom slipper time is bedroom slipper time. I don't know when, like, I don't know when that's selfish or when that's just really like, I work very hard and I'm an only parent and like, I just need to be by myself. So I don't know if I've said anything, but now I do meditation meetings every day and that's kind of saved my life. And I've been doing these back to basics almost every month since the pandemic began. I mean, there have been a lot of gifts for me during the pandemic. I know that sounds weird. I mean, it's a horrible crisis. I mean, without that, but some of the gifts are just like right here, what we're all experiencing right now. And that's it. It's, you know, life is weird. What can I say? Life is very weird right now in the big like scheme of things, but I'm able to kind of keep it together and focused in my own way. And that's it. And I love you all. And over and out. Thanks.